Larry Hausner here, the author of Save Baseball, a prescription for the major leagues. And as I say on every video, you can pick up my book anywhere online. So order yourself a copy today. So, fans, my guest today is one of the greats while playing one of the most difficult and demanding positions of them all, catcher. 16 years in the big leagues, known for his defense, but this guy could swing a bat as well. Over 1,400 hits, three-time All-Star, six-time Gold Glover, World Series champion in '85 with the Royals. And we were connected a couple of years ago through his series Behind the Plate. It was a Bible study right here in the same platform. And it's a pleasure to welcome Jim Sundberg. And I appreciate your time today, Jim. Good to see you.
Great. Well, thank you, Larry. It's great to be here and good to see you again.
So, Jim, I mentioned a moment ago, 16 years in the big leagues. Not many folks can say that played the game. That's a lot of wear and tear on your body. So I guess the first question is, how do you feel? I mean, what's the result of playing 16 years in the big leagues behind the plate?
The result was 3 joint replacement surgeries in 23. I had 2 knees and a hip done in 7 months. And last year, 24 was spent basically rehabbing. And I'm in pretty good shape right now. And so the 16 years had a lot of wear and tear. Still have issues with my back that I really can't do a whole lot with, but it is grinding. It is tough, but I loved it.
They wouldn't trade it, right?
I wouldn't trade for anything.
So 16 years in any profession, that's a long period of time to spend in any line of work. So when you look back on your career, what was the key or keys to that longevity of playing and lasting and making it through 16 years in the big leagues?
Yeah, there are 3 things that come to mind. One is I had a strong work ethic, which I saw my dad. My dad was a letter carrier and a school bus driver. And I saw my dad get up in with a foot of snow on the ground and actually walk to work, so he would be responsible. He would be there. He was a responsible employee. And when he retired after 33 years, he had like 16 months of sick leave built up. He was there, rain or shine or sickness or whatever. He was there, and so that was a good model that I saw. Also, is I had a very durable body. I could really take a beating and still play. There are players today that would not be playing in with some of the stuff that I had that was going on at the time, and it was a number of things from foul tips to stuff that eventually needed surgery, minor surgery, all of that stuff, not feeling well, and so forth. And the third thing is that always said the Wally Pipp story. Remember, Wally Pipp was the guy that took the one day off, and then Lou Gehrig took his spot, and he never got a chance to play again. So they would always tell the story. If you were out of the lineup, they go, "Remember Wally Pipp? Remember Wally Pipp?" So there's kind of a little fear-based motivation to be playing. So those 3 things probably led to being in baseball, but also being, I caught 1,400 games in my first 10 years, and 4 of those seasons, I think they're touched 150. And that also in that period, it included a strike that we had where the teams only played 100 games. And so it probably would have been higher. It probably would have been more like 144, 145 games a year over 10 years. And when I retired, I was leading all of catchers in games caught. And then the guys, as I retired, there were other guys that passed me. But there was a lot of motivation to play, and enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something a moment ago about today's players versus when you played. Well, we know that there's been some rule changes for the catching position. You probably got run over more often than you even care to remember, where today that's not even an issue anymore. These guys are kind of protected, are they not?
Yeah, and Larry, early on, I got hit a few times early on, and I go, how do I navigate this plate
Yeah.
to do it effectively and stay healthy? Because Carl Yastrzemski. I was blocking home plate one time on Yaz, and he hit my back ankle and twisted my knee, trying to get to the plate. And I go, this has got, and I see other catchers getting hurt. It's probably the primary reason that catchers would spend a lot of time out of the lineup would be plays at the plate. I separated my shoulder in '87 in Chicago with the Cubs, uh, and didn't even know it was separated. Played with a separated shoulder for 2 months. It was a left shoulder. Had it been my right shoulder, the season would have ended for me. But I could still catch and I could still play. And then got surgery in the off season, but they didn't have an MRI then. So it's a whole different game today than in that regard, and probably because agents and players, there's a bigger value on the player because of what they're making, and so they guard them and they take care of them. It's a much bigger investment and than it used to be.
They don't make them like they used to.
No, they don't.
So Jim, reflecting on those 16 years, so as a 38-year-old Jim Sundberg, looking back on those 16 years, what would you tell that rookie, that 22-year-old Jim Sundberg, about that journey to come?
Well, I would say number one is, take care of yourself, eat well, rest, uh, and try to learn as much as you can about the game to make adjustments. I think the average used to be 4 years in the big leagues. If you weren't able to make adjustments in 4 years, you were out of the game. And so you've got to be able to make adjustments at the plate, make adjustments at your position, and be able to listen and learn to what others that have been there. I was really taught to hit by a teammate. Jim Fregosi taught me a lot about hitting, and his work really helped me on how to inside out a ball, how to use all parts of the plate, the field, and those are a few little tidbits.
Funny you mentioned Jim Fregosi. As an aside, Jim, when I was a school principal, Jim's grandkids were at my school in Southern California. So
Wow.
got a chance to know the Fregosi family really well, and good people, good people. And obviously he
Yeah.
became a very successful manager. That was kind of the precursor to working with younger players. But how about behind the plate? Did you have some mentors that helped you regarding catching, or was it coach? I mean, you had a pretty good, I look back, you have some pretty strong coaches back in the day. Who helped you behind the plate?
Well, it all started when at 10 years of age, when the manager of the team was looking for a catcher, and he asked the team, the players, who would want to catch, and my dad said Jim will. So that's how I got started in it. My dad said Jim will, and so I started catching. I loved it. It was a great position for me. And uh, Dwayne Banks, my college coach at Iowa, was a former catcher, and I learned by observation. So I would watch that's my best style of learning is observation. And so on the job training, being there, watching others that are good, picking up little tips and things like that. I played during a time I really think I look back as a golden era of catching. There were so many catchers, either whose careers were ending in the early '70s or beginning or in starting at the late '70s and going on into the '80s. There was just a large group, and there's a large group of Hall of Famers during that time that played in the '70s, and so it was a good group of guys to watch and to learn from.
It's interesting. You trigger a thought about the role of a catcher. Your dad plugged you in. He must have seen some leadership in you and some organizational skills, and obviously not just the physical skills, but the mental skills as well. I recently saw something that Major League Baseball was sharing about today's pitchers and the breakdown that we're seeing a tremendous amount of injuries. So when you had to manage these staffs, right? You mentored them as well. And what is the difference today, you think? Because you served in roles, as I mentioned earlier, in the front office, as a coach, as a broadcaster when you were done playing. So you've got a pretty deep knowledge of the game beyond playing. What is going on today, in your opinion, Jim, regarding the injuries we're seeing with today's pitchers?
Well, Larry, I started one of my roles with the Rangers when I was in the front office is I oversaw also the youth league program. You know, I had a guy that was running it, but I basically oversaw it, and I would make sure that I would talk with the parents about. I had a book my wife and I wrote years ago called "How to Win at Sports Parenting," and so I would talk to them about keys. Keith Meister, who is the Rangers orthopedic specialist today, and actually he's doing surgeries from all over Major League Baseball now. He gave me a Sports Illustrated article years ago. This was on the front edge, and it had two maps of the United States. It had a hitter's map and a pitcher's map, and dots where players were from, Major League players were from. And predominantly the hitters, and these were hitters that had 100 or more Major League home runs, pitchers that had 100 or more Major League wins. The hitters were from the South, the pitchers were from the North, meaning that there were shorter seasons in the North. You couldn't hurt yourself. The pitchers couldn't hurt themselves as easily as if they were in the South. And what's happened, Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor were on the front end, maybe the poster children for really getting hurt while they were playing youth ball. They threw so many innings, and it's been explained to me that up until the age of 14, growth plates are developing, and then after 14, you can get a little more aggressive with off-speed pitches, with pitching more pitches in a game. And I think what happened is that in my generation, I was playing with guys that never pitched a lot in youth sports. Fergie never pitched until he was 16. Nolan didn't pitch a lot in Little League, but he pitched enough to open a lot of eyes. You know, Kenny Rogers didn't pitch until he got into pro ball. So what I think happened is there once you start throwing a lot of pitches, the clock starts on the arm. And so we've gone from, for example, Fergie Jenkins, my first year in the big leagues, he threw over 300 innings, completed 29 games. And now today, all of Major League Baseball, it was last year, I was looking it up. I think there were 36 complete games in all of Major League Baseball. The pitcher that we're getting today in the big leagues is one that has been through the youth leagues, has pitched a lot, and their arms are not don't have the endurance, I don't think, that they used to have. And so now, they're talking about, I've heard it mentioned twice now about a 6-man rotation. Now they're talking about, going from a 5 to a 6. It's already reduced pitchers' innings pitched from 300 down to 200, and now it's going to get into 150. And so the thing is that's happened in the other dynamic in baseball is today it's max effort. It's max effort on everything. In my time period, you would take a little bit off a pitch. You would take a little bit off a fastball. You take a little bit off a breaking ball. Max effort was not even talked about, nor velocity. It was basically location. And now the talk is velocity and it's max effort. And so guys if they go 5 innings in a game, that's a huge deal. 6 is a huge deal. And so that's my take on what's happening in pitching.
Yeah, and that's aligned with
It's
a
a
lot of
mouthful.
folks. Yeah, well, and it's important to hear, and I appreciate you talking about the youth part of it. I've over my years of I played into college a little bit, but I've coached a lot, and I think what you witnessed then, I saw as well, and I think it's important to talk about what's happening to the youth. And remember, when you and I played, baseball had a real season, right? I mean, no matter where
Right.
you grew up, it wasn't year round, and it is year round. And they pigeonhole kids to play one sport at a very young age. Like before they're even in middle school, they're tracked right into you're
Right.
a baseball player, and it's 12 months out of the year.
Yeah. And in baseball, if you're a hitter, that's okay, that's not too bad. I mean, you get to hit a lot. But if you're a pitcher, you're pitching year round. You're pitching in the spring, the summer, and fall ball, and most likely you're playing on two travel teams in some of those time periods. And so a good pitcher is getting overused. It's a and you know, my solution to that is if you got a 12-member team, everybody gets a chance to pitch. Everybody pitches in a game. And so uh, that's for the lower leagues, that's for the lower ages
Yeah,
as in baseball. So the amount of innings that are being put on an arm at an early age is having an effect later on.
for sure. And it's we see the results of that. So
Yeah.
Jim, when you play as many years as you did in the big leagues, you saw a lot of things that you saw it all. You also had the chance to play for a couple of legendary managers. Dick Hauser, we'll talk about him in a moment with the Royals, but you also got a chance to play for Billy Martin. And I would love to just get your well, you obviously had something cross your mind a moment ago when I said his name. Tell me what does come to mind when you see this gentleman right behind me, Billy Martin, manager of the. He didn't last long in tech. We didn't last long in many places, but what comes to mind when you hear Billy Martin, and what was your interaction with him?
Feisty, energetic, could be motivational. The first year he managed the Rangers, we went from last to second, and everything was fine. And he was very motivational, inspirational. Um, we got into more fights. He backed his players up. If somebody got hit, somebody was going down the next inning, and I was in the middle of that uh, instructing, and so uh, we would have done anything the first year. Second year, it just got out of balance. You know, I remember him drinking more. I remember him having issues at the ballpark with alcohol, and so uh, his tenure, he was known for turning a club around, but he couldn't do it for very long,
Mm-hmm.
for a very long tenure, and so that was Billy Martin.
Sadly, it sounded like he got in his own way.
Yeah, he
Right.
would sabotage himself. He basically
Mhm.
would. Yeah,
And that's unfortunate because obviously a great player, and he had the chops to be a terrific manager as he turned those clubs around, no matter where he went, as you said. And you mentioned a moment ago the word fight, and we know when we think of Billy Martin, we do think of fights, right? But we
yeah.
also think about a one of the craziest games that has ever been played. Um, I believe 1974, June of 74, you were part of 10-cent beer night in Cleveland, Ohio, where the then Indians had the brainstorm to, hey, let's offer 10 cents per beer. What could go wrong besides, I guess, a powder keg? Take me back through when you see a picture like this. Um, that must have been a horrific, frightening experience, I would think.
It was that was out in right field in Cleveland. But and if you notice, there were some Cleveland players there, and if it wasn't for the Cleveland players, we would have gotten hurt that day. I'm almost sure of that. But going back, it started the week before in Arlington. Milt Wilcox was pitching for the Indians. Lenny Randall was hitting, and I think we had hit a guy the inning before. I don't think intentionally, but they threw at Lenny the next inning. And I was sitting next to Billy, and Billy jumps off the bench and yells at Lenny got his attention. Lenny turns around. He goes, bunt the ball up the first base line and run up the pitcher's back. So Lenny goes, yeah, okay. So the next, and it's on the internet. You can get it on YouTube. He bunts the next pitch down the first baseline and just, Lenny is not real big, but he just mowed Milt Wilcox down. And a fight breaks out. And as the Indian players were going back to the dugout, they got drenched with some beer from our fans. And there was a little bit of a fracas at that time. So the next week, on the first day in, and from what I understand, the way to promote it the whole week is come out to 10-cent beer night and get Billy Martin and the Rangers. And so it was crazy. There were people running onto the field every inning, running across the field. There was a lady, a very heavy set lady that came out from behind home plate, tried to kiss the batter, tried to kiss the umpire. Everybody fled. It's the only person the security guys got the whole night, I think. Then when they wrestled down, there was a father-son combination that came out from behind home plate, went behind second base, dropped their drawers, and shot the moon to the crowd. In the sixth inning, the warning track was getting so crowded with litter, it was just crazy. And so in the ninth inning, we were ahead 5-1 going into the inning, and they got a rally going, and we're going to get beat. They had the tying and winning runs at second and third, and we're going to get beat. And that's when the guy came out of the stands at right field. The one that they're behind you, Mike Hargrove, I think was squaring up. And Tom Grieve right behind him, and then Gaylord Perry behind him. There was this guy in right field who tried to take mess with Jeff Burrows, and Jeff popped him, and then Toby Harrah got there and popped him, and then Hargrove got there and popped him. And I was with Lenny Randall, and Lenny says to me, he goes, "Get back to back." And I figured, Lenny knows how to fight, so I don't know how to fight. So I got back to back, and all of a sudden this guy was coming at me. A huge guy was coming at me, and I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips, and he wanted to take me down in just a few words.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, "Lenny," and Lenny was gone. But it was Dave Duncan who tackled him to the ground, and then Billy Martin was kicking him in the face. So anyway, and then we gradually made it back to the dugout, into the locker room, and we won it on a forfeit.
And you know that they had 10-cent beer night like a week or two later?
They had some scheduled,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess they never were allowed to schedule another one. They let the ones that were scheduled play out.
Yeah.
It's my understanding, but they never supposedly scheduled or weren't allowed to schedule another one after that. Whether it happened or not, I don't know.
And they capped it. There was, only so many, per customer. By the way, you mentioned Dave Duncan. His grandkids were at the same school.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
But
great.
let's shift gears to something a little bit more positive, and that, of course, the '85 World Series victory with the Kansas City Royals. So you played a prominent role offensively in Game 7. You drove in 4 runs. You missed a grand slam. I watched it again on YouTube the other day. It must have been millimeters. We won't even say inches. Right. But nonetheless, you drove in 4 runs. You won the game. And tell me, first of all, about Dick Howser, and why was he the right guy to lead you all to that World Series championship?
We had a lot of emotional guys on that team, and Dick was very non-emotional, very steady, very consistent. He had a great knowledge of the game. He knew his players really well. There was no game playing. There was no ego. And I think that permeated with the club. And, even having George Brett on the club, there was no ego there. Everybody was kind of equal. And there were several leaders in the clubhouse. I led over the pitching staff, and Hal McRae was in there as well. They had a couple of coaches that influenced the players, but Dick was just a very consistent, knowledgeable guy with a lot of integrity. and he was my favorite manager. He was the best manager that I played for.
I would say it's safe to assume a great person, right? Sounds
Yeah,
like, yeah.
great person.
It's interesting from that World Series, and I recorded a video about this during the World Series, how sometimes in the postseason, we see players who are lesser known. Buddy Biancalana on your roster, somebody that many folks right now are like, they're going to do some searching to find out who's Larry talking about. But we see this often in the postseason where somebody who is not a star rises to the occasion. I was reading he played error-free defense in every World Series game, and you know how critical defense is in winning
Right,
championships. Why
right.
do we often see guys we don't know or don't know well shine when stars struggle in on the biggest stage?
Well, I think a lot of attention is given to certain players because of how good they are, and the lesser known players kind of get pushed back or down, and are not talked about as much. And so and then again, it's really about location. I mean, sometimes you just happen to get a series, and you get pitches to hit, and sometimes you don't get pitches to hit. I used to go into Anaheim with Ryan and Tanana and Hartzell for a 3-game series, and I would say if I could come out of here 0 for 6 with 2 walks, I'll take that. I'll take it. And so, it's uh, teams just see players will get pitches to hit. They're trained to hit pitches that are hittable, and if they miss them, then they're in trouble. But pitchers go through streaks and hitters go through streaks, and sometimes those unknowns, all of a sudden they get good pitches to hit, and they don't miss them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're facing the best pitchers on every staff, right? So they're
Right.
bound to be around the plate. And would you think also pitchers in postseason play, they don't want to walk anybody. They're trying not to be super careful. They're trying to get the ball over the plate. They're nervous, and I think you're right. They're getting good pitches to hit. Couple more things we had mentioned earlier. Player for 16 years, then you're a broadcaster for 5 years with the Rangers, and then with the Rangers did some coaching, and you talked about your front office days. That's a pretty impressive trajectory through the game. How did those opportunities come up? And why did you decide to challenge yourself, I guess, and do different things in the game, all with the Texas Rangers?
Well, the pathway, for the most part, seemed to play out in front of me. I mean, going back to, um, I was drafted. You mentioned when we were talking offline, being drafted 3 times, and I was drafted out of Oakland, out of high school, and then the Rangers drafted me after my junior year in college, and then they drafted me in the winter draft of my senior year. And so the pathway, I couldn't seem to get away from the Texas Rangers. They drafted me twice, and there's a lot of detail behind that could have gone the other way, but it didn't. And it seemed to be the pathway for me. And obviously, baseball was the pathway. It was not. There was no indecision about which do I still go with college or do I go with baseball? I mean, baseball was it. And then toward the end of my career, there was always a thought in my mind that I might do some broadcasting. But it wasn't until the 2 weeks left in the season that I got approached by, through the permission of Tom Grieve, the general manager, and Bobby Valentine, HSC Cable Network wanted me to do some games while I was still in uniform. Now I had stopped playing. I had just under 1,500 hits, and Bobby Valentine didn't play me the last 6 weeks until the last day of the season, or the last home game. The last home game. So I could have gotten 1,500, but didn't. And but they HSE got permission, and I would, in the second inning, run up to the booth in a uniform And they said, as long as you're back in the dugout by the eighth inning, in case I want to use you as a pitch hitter, which never really happened. But so I went and broadcasted for 7 innings, went back to the dugout, and after a week was up, they asked me if they gave me an opportunity. Said, would you like to broadcast next year? And I was going to retire. And anyway, and so I went right into the broadcast booth for 6 years. And uh, then I always only wanted to do it for a few years. I always wanted to have my own business. So I transitioned after the 6 years. I had started transitioning into a job, having a business of my own. And I went that direction after 6 years, did that for about 5, 6 years, left the game. Had a great time, loved it, developed a training product, had 11 different products in sporting goods stores. But we were having to make a transition. It was expensive having your own business. I was flipping the tab by myself, really didn't have partners that were helping out. Then I got an opportunity to go back to baseball, and I that opened the door, and I went back to baseball, and I was in the front office for 13 years, of which some of that time I was a catching coordinator for the Rangers, and then eventually worked my way up as senior executive vice president of the Rangers under Nolan Ryan as president.
A fascinating trajectory. I didn't know that you had that gap in there where you just kind of went and did your own thing. And clearly the
Yeah.
See, look at the Rangers wanted you again, Jim. You're not giving it away.
Unbelievable. They got rid of me, but then they wanted me back. So 35 years in Major League Baseball is what it ended up being, and in a number of different roles, and it was a great run. It was enjoyable, and it's a long way in the past now. 10 years behind me now.
Well, I would imagine as we wrap up, the foundation of all of this, I would assume, is your faith. That's how you and I met, with your behind the plate series a couple of years ago. Can you talk a little bit about how your faith has got you through all the years in the big leagues? And it's the most important thing, and I've kind of saved it for last.
Well, the game is really not as easy as it may look from the stand. The farther away you get from home plate, the easier the game looks. And when you're standing around home plate, it's pretty fast and it's not easy. And it kept me on my knees. And I invited Christ into my life in 1977. I had been a churchgoer, but no one had told me about a personal relationship. And so I accepted Christ in 77. And it kind of catapulted me. My career turned around then. Lots of things kind of turned around. Now, it didn't always go right, and it didn't always go easy, and there was never always just great seasons. There were some struggles and bumps along the way, but for the most part, my career took off in an upward trajectory from that time. And is grinding. It kept me on my knees. Did a lot of praying, and have wonderful wife Janet. We've been married 53 years now, 3 children, 11 grandchildren, and so I came up with a purpose statement in '84 that was something that I kept in front of me, put it on a plaque, kept it in front of me, and basically it comes down to three things. Having a loving family, an earnest relationship with other a relationship with other people, and trying to promote them, and an earnest relationship with the God who made me. And so it helped to keep my eyes on what was important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's an important message for all of us to hear, and really appreciate it. Jim, it has been a pleasure. We could talk for hours, and all of my notes, kind of scrapped them. We just kind of went a little rogue there because it was just a fascinating time to spend with you. So I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Hope we can circle back and kind of pick up where we left off again. Really appreciate it. Thank you. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And as always, for the love of the game, I'm Larry Hausner.